Most agents and teams hope for at least a 20% bump after some type of CRM setup or rebuild. Will Hutson's team out of Georgia have had a consistent period of growth since we built their system back all the way to August 2023. We actually pulled his most recent 6-month period, and his appointments increased yet again by another 192% compared to the previous 6-month period. And I'm so excited to dive in to how the heck he's been making this happen since 2023. Will was already using Follow Boss for 2 years prior to working together. The software and the platform wasn't necessarily the issue. It was that no one on the team had the bandwidth to configure it properly. So it kind of just sat there halfway set up. The interesting part of this conversation is going to be the compounding effect after the setup was built. Will's numbers have continued to climb over the past 2.5 years straight. All we did was initially set up the architecture and system in August 2023. Before we start and dive into this conversation, Will, thank you so much for making the time to join me for this conversation. This one was going to be really exciting and fun today.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it, Elena. Thank you.
So I'm going to rewind the clock, 2023, before
Yeah.
we even started working together, before you received our setup. Like I mentioned at the beginning, you were using Follow Boss almost 2 years in. You were already developing your own lead generation. At the time, before this CRM build, what would happen? What was your, I guess, strategy when you generated a lead? What would happen once you received the lead?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. And I want to go back a little bit further from what you're talking about in terms of, the setup that we had. Me and one of my first agents, we both have engineering backgrounds. And so we were nerding out on the back end of things and realized very quickly about 6 months into building out the automations and all the email content and templates that this is not our best use of time. And it was incredibly time consuming to say the least, right? So we realized very quickly we need a different solution. And that's when we turned to you guys. What really kind of got me moving in that direction is because we did have incomplete automations that did not go as long as I felt the life cycle of a client coming in the door from a lead source really warranted, right? There's some times where you're going to need follow up for multiple years, even if you're going to be long term in this business. And so, not having that ability to scale it that far into the future without a significant time investment that me and my agent did not have at the time in order to be productive in the space that makes us actual money. I just had to turn somewhere else. And you were the first person that I actually was introduced to through Facebook, actually, some of the groups that we're both part of.
When you say it was time consuming, do you remember off the top of your head, like how much time you had spent up to that point?
Oh God, yeah, it's a nightmare. We spent a good 6 months, and the system, as you stated, was still very incomplete in terms of what my expectations were for a completely built out automation and email template kind of follow up system. We were also building out some of the texting, and that's still very limited even today by today's standards through Fallboss, the CRM that we use. But even then, we didn't even have time to refocus on something as simple as getting a text out within the first 5 minutes without toiling and toiling over the scripting and what works and what doesn't. And so, I'm an overthinker. I know when I'm overthinking something, but it's hard for me to stop. And it just became too much of a time investment at that point. We spent a ton of time, at least 6 months plus, on the build out.
Yeah. Okay, so you had some halfway written campaigns. You were probably, just based on what you shared, like overthinker, you probably would write it and then rewrite it. On top of that, what did the humans do? Like, what did you do? What did the agents do after a lead came in?
A fantastic question. And this is one of the biggest selling points to me once we first met and you explained the system in general. I was trying to get away from the task oriented way of working leads, which is what we had started with. And that's what most major CRMs push you into, is just checking off a list of tasks. The problem that I realized very quickly as a team lead, because I'm also, running a team, I'm running an office. I own a Century 21 here in Woodstock, Georgia. So I have a lot of administrative duties on top of my production that I have to keep very high to be profitable. And what I realized very quickly was that I was drowning in these tasks. I would time block as well as I could, but if you miss one day, you're just constantly playing catch up. So I said, okay, we've got to move to a smart list model. And I was thinking about trying to build that out on top of completing the automations. That's when we got introduced with your company, and me and you specifically, where you had told me, hey, this is smart list driven, where you work through smart lists instead of a task list, and that just spoke volumes to where we wanted to go. And that's really where we were working. It was a day-to-day task list, and then once we moved away from that, it was so much easier to keep things from falling through the cracks.
Good answer. Okay, so then is there anything you can think of either prior to working together or initially receiving our build out that you were hesitant about or skeptical about?
I'd say the whole thing, to be honest, because I am a control freak. I think most people that do real estate at a higher level are built that way, where they feel like they have to have their hands on everything. I have to have input on everything. Nobody can do it as well as I can do it. What was really great to me, though, was when I started reading out scripting, and I think in our initial conversation, you'd mentioned that a lot of it was modeled after two people that I look up to in this industry, which is Phil Jones and Jimmy Mackin. And I really, really trust their messaging and the way that they structure outreach and follow up and things like that, especially in the email space. And once you told me that you guys were leaning heavily on that type of scripting, I kind of felt a little bit more at ease. I let my hands off the wheel completely, and then we haven't looked back since. And it's been a major improvement for what we were doing before.
Yeah. Okay. So you kind of teased this whenever I asked you what were you doing before. So then after the setup completed, you probably took some time to get used to it. But after you made that transition over, what am I trying to say? You stopped using tasks, but then what? What did your day to day look like?
Okay, so this is a good question too. Okay, running a team, one of the things I realized very quickly is that, and I knew this about myself, but even more so, it was driven home once I started guiding multiple people, through this industry and trying to help them become successful. The more complicated that you make something, the less the adoption rate. So it's diminishing returns. The more steps that you put in place, the less buy-in you're going to have overall. And that was a real challenge for us, especially with the tasking list and when people were feeling overwhelmed by it. The beautiful thing about when we transitioned over is it was so much easier that we didn't really have a lot of problems with the transition, because especially the people that were already working through our old system, it was like a breath of fresh air to know, hey, all I need you to do, I don't even need you to think about who to call. I need you to call list 1 through X, whatever that may be. And as long as you're doing that once a week, nothing falls through the cracks. It's as simple as that. And I made it as simple as possible. Keep the updates in the system for logging the calls and make sure they're in the right stage and make the call. That's it. Literally 3 steps. So we were going from, having to coach people on what days a week, are you going to try and catch up on your task list that you're going to be, underwater with. There was no more of that. And to be quite frank, from a personal perspective, I like to time block certain sections of the week to make calls. It's not realistic to think that you're going to get a high answer rate if you're calling Monday through Friday regimented. I know in my area when people are more willing and less willing to answer the phone. So to be able to model my follow-up system in a way where I can skip several days and get to the meat and potatoes of when I need to be calling without feeling overwhelmed with tasks that I've got to catch up on was a huge boon for me personally. And I feel like that translated to the team pretty easily.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I love that. Okay, so then I started looking at our timeline of working together since 2023. You came back in 2024 to do a refresh beginning. You came back again a couple months later to do a refresh because things shift and change, new lead sources, new tech stack, again in 2025, and then again just recently because of Zillow Pro.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what makes you want to keep doubling down inside of Follow Up Boss and with us, Kee Technology, rather than starting over somewhere else in a different CRM or with a different company, or like you said, and before we started this interview, like your stuff. So why not just go with one of those other options?
Well, I'm not going to lie. When there was a kerfuffle, if you will, I don't know how often I've ever used that word, but I'm going to use it now. Uh, when the privacy policy had changed within Fall Out Boss, we did shop it. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
We did get exposed to several different CRMs during that process. Honestly, none of them really fit what we were trying to do. I felt like they were much more complex. I felt like there was always something missing that we would be giving up that was not really worth transitioning over. And then once Zillow did make the announcement of Zillow Pro, I said, okay, wait a minute, let's pump the brakes on this and let's revisit staying with Fall Boss, exploring the Zillow Pro option, because I feel like we would be at a disadvantage with people that were employing this technology. So once we looked into it, I made the decision we're going to stand pat. We're going to stay with the tech stack that we're familiar with, we know works, and then we're going to double down on this new tech that we feel like is coming our way vis-a-vis the Zillow Pro program. Once we decided to make that happen, I realized very quickly, and this is to you guys' credit, the transition was going to be a little weird because it was going to add a ton of stages. And I'm telling you, I'm OCD about how many stages we have. There's too many, and I was losing my mind. I was like, there's far too many. We need to make a decision. Do we go with the new stages that are coming along down the pike with Zillow Pro? Are we going to do some hybrid of our stages currently? And eventually I went for simplicity, right? Like we just talked about. So once we decided, hey, look, these are totally fine. In fact, in some ways, what I've realized is that they're a little bit easier for my agents to deal with because they're a little bit more descriptive about where they are in the process instead of being
Mhm.
overgeneralized. Once we made that decision, that's when I called your team and said, hey, look, do you guys do this? I'm sure you do. But can you integrate the Zillow model into what we're doing? And the answer was obviously yes. And once we did that, I felt a lot less pressure once we rolled that out to the team. And everybody had a really high adoption rate of that. I mean, 100% in fact. So everybody's been overjoyed with that transition. And as painful as it is for somebody that's as OCD as I am about change and, oh my gosh, is this going to upset the apple cart on things that are actually working? I'm really thankful that we went ahead and made that decision.
Yeah. Okay. So I said this at the tippy top of the introduction. I'm going to get into the fun numbers now. And I just want to know your take.
Mm-hmm.
I just looked at the past most recent 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know what, May, March, no, May, April, March, February, January, December,
Okay.
compared to the previous 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Your appointments set increased 192%
Mm-hmm.
compared to the past previous months. And then if you were to compare those 6 months before those to the past 6 months, there's just like a pattern of increasing, increasing, increasing. There's been no like flat line or, oh no, that was a bad 6 months.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not sure if you even knew that. So if you didn't, like, ooh, congratulations. But that's so rare. So when you look or hear those numbers, um, why? How?
Right.
Because
Okay.
that's not just having a CRM built out for you.
Right. Yeah. No, there's it's discipline, honestly, and consistency. I mean, I know that you hear those in coaching calls around the country. I've done several speaking events on different things, and it always usually comes back to that. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, kind of thing. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. Generally, with every team out there, from my experience. But honestly, if I could go back and trace it back to a couple of things that we're doing, it's really being able to hold people accountable with visibility on what's actually going on in the business, right? So I talked about simplicity in terms of working the actual leads and doing the follow up. There's also, from a team lead perspective, and I also employ a sales manager to help me with this. There's more visibility, or ease, I should say, there's an ease of visibility where I can go in and literally see what people are doing within seconds. I take a look at their smart lists and know which lists need to be cleared and which ones don't. So immediately I know if there's a problem that we need to go in and take a look at and have an accountability session over. So it makes it easy for me and my sales manager to identify that very quickly. So it makes it easier for me to hold that line, toe that line of, hey guys, when you signed onto the team, there's a couple of mandatories that you signed on for. One was the accountability, and here it comes. And so that's one of the things that I'm really happy that we're able to do at a very high level, to keep the folks in line with what they need to be doing. And honestly, from my perspective as a team lead, I'm no different than anybody else. I need to hold my own self accountable, and I do have a coach. I think every team lead out there probably should, right? And I do have them take a look at what I'm doing in the systems, and if I'm slacking at all, man, I get the whip cracked immediately, and it's easy for them to even see it, even though they're not even in our ecosphere every day. That's how simplistic the setup is for us, and I just can't harp on the simple nature of how we've got the setup to make it easier for everybody involved. Because look, we're all producing right now, and we're producing at a high level. And if you're going to do that, these systems need to be set up in a way that you don't have to put a lot of thought or time into them in order to figure out how to work them the best way possible.
Yeah. Love it. You know your stuff, like I said. Okay, here's some fun stuff for you. I'm going to share screen, and I pulled some examples with current clients you're working with,
Mhm.
just to show that you're not just talking to talk. So this person responded. I've blocked names for privacy reasons, but this is one of your leads who responded, like, perfect scenario here, responded to the very initial first text message. And then actually one of the agents within your team ended up having a 20-minute conversation with them
Yeah.
to discuss. It was like a property inquiry. They really liked the property's appeal. I think it's a property inquiry. Was this a?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
So ended up having a 20-minute conversation. And by the way, I love that, like, yes, there's full adoption with the CRM. Heidi didn't even put in notes of her own. This is just the AI summary.
Yeah.
She's not like super organized in doing these bullet points here. And the lead is currently an active client. And I put these numbers here now just to show like how much effort has been put in. 11 emails back and forth, 14 text messages, and 3 calls totaling 40 minutes logged so far for this person to be currently an active client. So that's example 1. Example 2 is a seller who got an email and text but ended up calling you, which
Mhm.
I've not seen before. You missed the call. You were probably on a call or on appointment.
Yeah.
The agent called back, had a 9-minute conversation, agreed to meet, did a market analysis of the property. They're relocating. They've had a lot of texts and phone calls. When I say a lot, like 43 text messages back and forth, 10 phone calls, 35 minutes logged, and they've received 4. When it says marketing emails, that could be like a batch email or a drip email, their current client. And then another one here, back and forth, a couple of text messages, booked an appointment right away. That's just like, again, like best case scenarios here. Had a 17-minute conversation the next day, booked a listing appointment. Okay, I'm just kind of blocking it here, but a total of 104. This person loves texting. A total of 104 text messages have been sent. That's their preferred communication. If you're ever wondering, like, just look at history to figure out how to reach out to someone. 2 phone calls totaling 17 minutes and 1 email. My preferred is text as well. I just don't have time for a phone call. And then here's one more buyer saying, yeah, of course. Had another 10-minute, almost 10-minute phone call. Let's see. Sent property listings. Ended up being, are they a current client? I can't recall, but another person. There's a trend here. 186 text messages, 6 phone calls, 26 minutes, 5 emails. So your team does what you ask them to, is the moral of the story. You're not just talking to talk.
Yeah, I honestly, some of those I feel like are low in terms, especially the phone call counts. I think those are probably the layups that we infrequently see, but some of my favorite wins are the ones that you nurture for, 6, 7, 12, 24 months, and then you've got multiple phone calls, and just to get that one in-person meet. Those are the best ones for me personally.
Yeah.
A lot of my team would probably agree with me on that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I have a little bit of an off-the-cuff question for you, so you might have to think about this.
Okay.
As we wrap up the conversation, is there one tip or strategy you'd be open to sharing to people watching this interview that you've implemented in your business that's had some type of impact? Doesn't have to be specific to Follow Boss or technology, although it could be. Just some type of impact on your lead management, past client retention, repeat referral, business growth, overall sales, just like one impact in some way to help your business grow that you'd be open to sharing to the listeners on this video.
Yeah, if I had to think about it, I don't want to go with the old cliches of like speed to lead or anything like that. Honestly, I would say if I really had to put deep thought into this, let me think. You know, okay, well, one of the major things that I think about when I look at my business from a day-to-day standpoint, because I think a lot of people that build out teams and that work in this industry at this level and have, honestly, responsibility for several people's lives in their hands, is they look big picture. And I think the big thing for me is that can become overwhelming, and sometimes it leads to burnout. In fact, it burned me out. And when I changed my mindset to keep it simple, keep it in front of you and just master the day, that really helped me move forward, because everybody has the bad days. Everybody loses listings. Everybody has a bad interaction in a buyer consult that doesn't pan out and they go somewhere else, that listing appointment you think was a slam dunk, and next thing you know, the house is on the market. You're going to have so many defeats in this business. You've got to keep a view on your business from day to day. And there's a time and place for that overall view of your business and where it's going in the future and all that kind of thing. But as long as you can kind of keep it in front of you and understand that you're going to have far more failures than wins, and understand that, Hall of Fame baseball players a failure 70+% of the time. That's the way I look at this, is that, we're all baseball players out here and we're just trying to hit 300. And in fact, our wins are closer to 100. You're looking at a 10% clip and beyond that, even lower. And you could still be making a lot of money and providing for your families at a high level by doing that. So I think perspective, keeping it day to day and not overwhelming yourself with the big picture as much as you kind of want to as a visionary.
You're preaching to the choir here, Will. I love it. Well, congratulations to your team, Will. I don't know how you're going to top the past 6 months, but you somehow keep doing it. What you've built over the last 2.5 years is really impressive. And like I said already, 2 times, maybe 3 times at this point, you really know your stuff. So for those of you watching, if you want to see how to build the system, how we build the system that keeps producing year over year for teams like Will's, so that you have that architecture available to you, we host ongoing CRM masterclasses that walk through the framework that we use to build an account like Will's. So you can register in the description below. Will, thank you for your time, and thank you again for trusting us with your business over and over again, and for being willing to sit here today and share your whole story.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.